Alex here with a high conflict child custody video on reunification therapy. Before I start this video, I learned a lesson from a previous video, and that was right of first refusal. What I learned in right of first refusal was that sometimes people use pretexts and band-aids to sort of try and cover up and work around issues that they think that the other parent may have with the children. Don't do that. It doesn't work with right of refusal, and it won't work with this video either. A lot of people in the right of first refusal video said that they felt that their ex was abusive and neglectful, and that they would be better able to protect the kids if they had right of first refusal. And that's a complete and total, that's not true at all, because a parent who's a high conflict ex who's actually abusive is going to exploit right of first refusal, and they're going to use it as obnoxiously as possible to take as much of your time as they can, whilst simultaneously refusing to offer up any of their time to you. And ultimately, all of the problems that they may potentially have with regards to abuse and neglect and whatever else, whatever other concerns that the parent had, they're still going to be there. They're still going to occur. Right of first refusal is not even abandoned. It's not even close enough to even serving that purpose at all. In fact, often it ends up turning into a gigantic contempt of court war. The judge goes insane, and almost literally insane. I've seen a bunch of judges, not just even one judge. I've seen cases of multiple judges just snapping, and at one point saying, "That's it. I'm never ordering this again. Anyone who has it, I'm vacating it." They just so. I'm slightly off course, but it's the same problem with this video as well, with parents who have an ex that hasn't been around, and they have serious concerns with regards to that ex. They have concerns of abuse and neglect and emotional immaturity and mental health, but they don't bring those up in court. Instead, what they say is that person hasn't been around for 2 years and the child is afraid of them, so they shouldn't have to go spend time with them. Again, if you have actual concerns, abuse and neglect concerns, you have to bring up those actual concerns. Don't try to use this pretext of the child hasn't seen the parent in too long, and so they're anxious, they have anxiety about going to spend time with them. Don't use that, because the court's first thing, the reaction of the court is going to be to try to order reunification therapy, and all of the actual problems that need to be addressed have not been addressed. Also, it's very difficult to separate yourself from the liars. There's a lot of parents who will refuse to allow contact to the other parent. And then when it ends up in court after 9 months or 10 months or over a year, they'll say, hey, they haven't been around, they're a bad person. When in reality, they were perfectly willing to be around, wanted to be around, but the high conflict parent refused to allow it. So a lot of times, a person with serious concerns ends up getting lumped in with that group, and that doesn't help the case either. So setting that little piece aside, I want to go into one more disclaimer before I actually get to the meat of this issue. Some people have claimed that abandonment of the children is very serious and damaging, and that's actually true. I do agree with that. In fact, the legislature of Nevada has created a statute that triggers a presumption of abandonment that justifies the termination of that parent's parental rights. And I talk about that in the video, termination of parental rights. That's actually something that I did with my ex. I terminated her parental rights because she abandoned our son for 6 months. 6 months triggers the presumption. The definition of abandonment is more than people think. It's not just not being around. It's also not making phone calls, not sending gifts, not making financial support, and not sending letters and other things like that in the mail. Abandonment is actually a big deal. It's comprehensive. It's across the board. And what I wanted to say is, if that's a concern, it is a valid concern. There is a remedy available, but you do have to use that remedy. And I talk a lot more about this in the video, termination of parental rights, but it's not in the best interest of the child just to terminate a parent's parental rights and that's it, just erase the parent and move on. As I explained in that video, the termination of parental rights is coupled with an adoption. The termination of parental rights frees the child up for adoption. What ends up happening is the child gets a parent who's there now, because a step-parent adopts or some other situation happens. And yes, it is better for the child to have a new parent where the other parent wasn't involved at all, and who knows if they're ever going to come back, versus no parent at all. And so you end up with some of these situations where a parent isn't around for 3 or 4 years, and the parent who has custody doesn't do anything about it. They don't terminate that parent's parental rights. And so several years later, sometimes that parent comes back. And the way the court sees it is, it's not good that the parent was gone for that long, but this isn't about punishing the parent. This is about doing what's best for the child. And that parent hasn't been terminated yet, and nobody has adopted them and replaced them. And since none of that's happened, then it is appropriate to bring that parent who hasn't been around back in, give that child a chance to have a relationship with that parent. So for the people who are upset about parents who come back after all these after all these years and want to get involved with the child, if that's a problem, you have to deal with that problem and use the termination of parental rights and adopt the child to your new partner. If you don't do that, I mean, I think I talk about this in the video deserving custody. Custody of children isn't supposed to be awarded and deprived based on what parents deserve. That's not what's paramount. The paramount consideration is the best interest of the child. So oftentimes people feel like, well, they haven't been around, so they don't deserve to have custody. That's not how the courts make their decision. I have a video on that. Again, it's called deserving custody. I also have another one that kind of applies custody by morality, because some people see it as immoral or unethical that the parent was gone for all those years. Same difference, kind of. You can watch the video custody by morality as well. I think it's a little bit on topic. All right, so now I can finally get into the meat of the issue of this video, which is reunification therapy. If it's being litigated and it's being taken to the judge and it has to be ordered, I am a strong believer that it's not going to work. For reunification to work, both parents have to work together as a team to make it happen. The custodial parent who the child has a bond with is the one that the child is going to trust the most. And the parent who hasn't been around, they've been gone for years, that parent is going to need help from either that parent or a therapist, if that parent stays out of it and doesn't interfere, which I'm going to go into in a second, to get that bond to form. If that parent is resisting reunification with that child, the court ordering reunification therapy isn't going to help, because that parent is going to just find ways to undermine it. They may say, oh, their car broke down, they can't get to an appointment. Child is sick, they can't get to an appointment. They got stuck in traffic, they can't get to an appointment. They may not even bother showing up to appointments. They may just wait till the child gets back and do everything in their power to unravel that little bit of time that the parent who's been gone has had with the therapist to form a bond with the child. I talk about some of the tactics that alienators use in undermining reunification in the video Alienation and Abuse. I'm not going to go into all of them in this video when I have a separate video on it. So if you want to know what sort of myriad control mechanisms an abusive high conflict parent has at their disposal, watch that video, because there are a lot. And the parent who has custody of the child has a tremendous amount of time with that child. It's almost effortless for them to undermine and obstruct reunification therapy. And then they have a third choice. They can just show up at appointments and just sit there, and just by their presence alone can be something that triggers the child into clamming up, or not wanting to open up and reach out to the parent who's trying to make a relationship with them. So that's a problem too. If a judge is going to order reunification therapy, they're going to have to be prepared to sanction the other parent if they refuse to allow it, if they try to undermine it, or refuse to take the child, with, in my opinion, imprisonment. Contempt. It's one of the penalties for contempt of court, or even a modification of custody. But the problem a lot of times is judges don't really get this. I've seen videos on YouTube of judges who went on for over a year trying to get this reunification therapy to work, and they just kind of took the high conflict parents' excuses at face value, and they just let that parent string that child along, and the other parent who was trying to make contact string them along for over a year. That judge ordered all kinds of things. She ordered the parent to drop the child off and stay out of the appointment room. She ordered the parent to drop the child off and leave. She tried everything in her power to keep that parent from meddling, but the parent would just adapt. Okay, fine, I can't stay at appointments. As soon as I pick the child up, I'm going to just undermine and undo everything that was done in that room. Ultimately, that ended up turning into a modification of custody and a huge scandal in Nevada. But I won't go into that in this video, because then it's just going to turn into like a 30-minute video. So that is my opinion on reunification therapy. That is why I don't think it will work. If a judge is going to order reunification therapy and it doesn't work because a parent is undermining the process, the judge is going to have to look seriously at the custodial relationship and consider modifying it. That's going to end up being what it comes down to, is if a parent isn't being allowed time with the child for no good reason, most likely they're dealing with an ex who has severe emotional immaturity issues or a personality disorder. And if either of those two things are true, that is going to manifest an abuse and neglect in all sorts of other areas of the child's life. And the parent who's trying to form a relationship with the child is going to end up having to prove a case for modification of custody in some way. They're going to have a whole lot more time with the children to form the bond with the child on their own. Even then, I warn people in some of these other videos that I've done, alienation and abuse and comparative alienation, I warn people that even with joint physical custody, oftentimes when the child reaches teenage years, control can still slip away from them. And again, I want to stay focused on this topic, which is reunification therapy. Plenty of references for people to jump into and watch, just to sort of get where my opinion comes from, because my opinion comes from 7 or 8 different opinions that I have that are connected to this specific opinion. I think if you look at reunification therapy with no experience whatsoever in high conflict child custody, it seems like a good thing. It sounds smart, but when you really think about the dynamics of high conflict child custody and the bizarre and irrational motives of the high conflict ex, which tends to come from this warped and distorted perception of reality. They don't, what they think is reality isn't really what's happening, and their brain almost just bends all of the facts to what they want them to be to reach the conclusion that they want to. And from that comes all of these irrational actions that they take, and one of them tends to be to interfere in reunification. So it's tough. It's one of those things that's tough. The last thing that I'm going to mention before I end this video is oftentimes reunification therapy is expensive, and it may not be something that is within reach for some of these parents. Because of the costs associated, they may need to look at potentially getting the judge to split costs between both parents. And then for parents who can't even afford the bare minimum, it possibly isn't even a solution at all for that family. I think at this point I'm going to end this video. Definitely post something in the comments below. I do know that some judges stumble in the right direction when it comes to reunification therapy. Some judges will order reunification therapy, and then when they see that it's not working and that a parent is interfering, they will give the parent who's trying to form a bond more time. And they'll say, oh, you know what? You're not really trying that hard to take him to reunification therapy. I'm just going to give them a weekend. And then they come back to court. I'll give them a couple of overnights. And then they come back to court. You know what? They're close enough. I'm going to give them joint physical custody. And it ends up working itself on its own for the reasons that I mentioned previously, which is by virtue of just having a lot of time with the child, now they form a bond. You know, it sucks that the therapy didn't work because the other parent was interfering with it as much as they could. But by having so much time and overnights with the child, they end up reunifying with the child coincidentally anyway. So, and that's if the high conflict parent doesn't interfere with that. So what I mean by that is the judge orders, you know what, you're going to have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday with overnights, and the high conflict parent says, you know what, I'm just not going to give you the children. Fight me in court over it. And of course that can go in some positive directions. If the high conflict parent resorts to that kind of conduct, it really does open the gateway for contempt of court and modification of custody under the best interest factors. But this video, it's been one of the things that's been frustrating me for a long time now, and I just didn't do a video on it. But you know, at this point I realized I can actually refer people to all of my other videos that sort of led me to this conclusion. So it does make sense to this video now, so that people who aren't sure if what I'm saying makes sense, they can click on the cards that pop up, or they can search for those other videos and watch them and see sort of why I ended up getting to this conclusion as to why I don't really think it works. I'm not sure if I mentioned this yet, but there is a few experts out there. I'm not going to mention them by name, because some people don't really agree with these experts, but there's a few experts out there that think that something like reunification therapy, if it's even going to really be seriously considered, can't even be started unless the child is entirely removed from the parent that's interfering with it and getting in the way of it, and put into the custody of the parent who's trying to form a bond for at least 6 months. That's one of the more extreme opinions out there. I don't even fully agree with that opinion, because I think when you reach a situation that's that severe, 6 months of reunification really isn't the answer. It's the total deprivation of custody of the alienating parent in that type of situation. That's, I mean, again, it's like, it's just one of those things that people aren't going to fully understand unless they can also get into understanding mental health and where people's choices come from if they have some severe emotional immaturity issues, because they just think in completely different ways, and they don't respond well to criticism, and they also don't respond well to redirection or correction. And unfortunately, oftentimes they're really good at faking like they do understand and like they do care. They're really good at saying the right things, and then when nobody's looking and the judge's back is turned, taking actions that are completely inconsistent with what they're supposed to be doing, to co-parent with the other parent and all that stuff. So anyway, I think I've gotten off track enough times in this video. I'm going to go ahead and end this video. If you have any experience with reunification therapy, please post in the comments below. If you had negative or positive experiences, definitely post it. Also, post details such as if it was something that you and your ex worked on together jointly, or if you really did need a court's order. You know, there could be some situations out there where a parent really didn't want to fight it, and the judge ordered it, and the parent complied with all the orders, and they allowed the children to reunify with the therapist and all that. But really, in those situations, the same, in my opinion, the same could have been done without the therapist, and just letting that parent form a bond with the child on their own. Just oftentimes it just comes down to having time and contact. It really does matter. So anyway, with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this video, and I will see you guys next time.